My stepmom tried to erase me from the family business. She walked into that meeting with a folder in her hands, her smile sharp and rehearsed, and said, "You don't belong here anymore." My throat tightened and my palms went cold. But the real sting wasn't her words. It was my dad sitting right there beside her, not saying a single word. This is the same man who once told me, "One day, sweetheart, you'll carry this company." Now he couldn't even meet my eyes. That silence cut me deeper than anything she could have said. And what followed would tear apart everything I thought I knew about family. But let me take you back, because betrayals like this don't happen overnight. My name is Emily. I'm 30 years old, and this business has been part of my blood since I could walk. While other kids spent their summers at the pool or hanging out at the mall, I spent mine at the office. I filed invoices, balanced ledgers, answered phones, sat through long meetings I barely understood but forced myself to pay attention. I learned contracts line by line, and I could tell you the profit margin on every product we carried by the time I was 15. I wasn't just my dad's daughter. I was his shadow, his partner in everything that mattered. After my mom died, the company wasn't just a job, it became our bond. Those nights when it was just the two of us in the office, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, takeout containers scattered across the desk, and my dad patting my shoulder with a tired smile, those nights kept me going. He'd always say the same thing. "This is ours, Em. One day, it'll all be yours." Those words were my anchor. They gave meaning to every late night, every sacrifice, every time I said no to a social life so I could prove myself at the company. And for a long time, I believed him. Then Lena came along, my stepmom. She arrived all polished smiles and carefully chosen compliments. She'd bring coffee for the staff, laugh at my dad's old stories, call me sweetheart like she'd always been family. At first, I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. My dad deserved happiness after losing my mom so young, and I thought maybe Lena could bring some light back into his life. But her eyes told a different story. They weren't on the people or the legacy. They were on the office keys, on the safe in the corner, on the contracts spread across the desk. She didn't see family. She saw control, and slowly she began to plant seeds. Subtle little remarks at dinner like, "Emily works so hard, but she's still young," or, "Maybe she's too emotional to handle big decisions." She'd smile when she said it, but the words stuck like poison. I waited for my dad to defend me, to remind her that I'd been in this business nearly my whole life. But he never did. He just sat there, chewing quietly, eyes on his plate, letting her words hang in the air. At first, I told myself he was just avoiding conflict, that he didn't want to stir the pot. But as weeks turned into months, the silence became a pattern. And that silence grew louder than any argument. I started noticing how her influence crept into every corner of the business. She wasn't just a wife at home. Suddenly she was sitting in meetings, suggesting changes, whispering in my dad's ear before big decisions. Staff who had once looked to me for guidance began glancing nervously at her instead. It was like she was rewriting the script of who mattered and who didn't. And my dad, my father who used to beam with pride when I closed a deal, just let it happen. He didn't push back. He didn't remind anyone of my role. He just faded further and further into her shadow, and in the process, dragged me there too. I kept telling myself it couldn't last, that one day he'd snap out of it and remember everything we'd built together. But deep down, I think I knew. I knew the night she came into that meeting with that folder, her nails tapping the cover, her smile wide and confident. She was ready to erase me, and my dad was ready to let her. And that was the night I realized silence can destroy a legacy faster than words ever could. After that meeting, something inside me broke, but it didn't stop Lena. If anything, my silence gave her more room to grow bolder. She started showing up at the office more often, heels clicking on the polished floor like a warning bell. She'd lean against the doorframe of my office with that fake smile and say things like, "Emily, why don't you take a step back from the big accounts? You must be so tired. Let me handle them for you." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning dressed as kindness. And my dad? He'd walk right past us, eyes fixed on his phone, pretending not to hear. I tried to ignore her, to bury myself in work, but I couldn't ignore the whispers from the staff. People who had trusted me started second-guessing, asking, "Did your dad approve this?" When they used to just come straight to me. One afternoon, I walked into the conference room to find Lena standing at the head of the table, flipping through a stack of financial reports like she owned the place. "We're restructuring," she announced to the managers, as if she had the authority. I opened my mouth to object, to remind everyone that I was the one running operations, but then I saw my dad. He was sitting quietly at the far end of the table, nodding along, his expression blank. That moment stung worse than any cut. It was one thing for Lena to overstep. It was another for him to let her. Later that night, I confronted him in the kitchen. The smell of coffee hung in the air as I slammed the fridge door shut and said, "Are you really going to let her take over everything we built?" He didn't even look at me. He just stirred his coffee and muttered, "She's only trying to help." My voice cracked. "Help? She's erasing me, Dad." His eyes flickered up for a second, then back down. "Don't be dramatic." Dramatic. That word burned into me. It was the same word Lena used whenever I challenged her in front of others, and now it was coming out of his mouth. It felt like losing him twice, once as my father and again as my partner. The next few weeks were a blur of humiliation. Lena started locking cabinets that I'd always had access to, handing out assignments that cut me out of projects I'd led for years. When clients called, she'd intercept, chirping into the phone with her fake warmth, introducing herself as one of the new decision-makers. The final straw came on a Friday afternoon when I walked into the office to find her daughter, her smug, barely 22-year-old daughter, sitting at my desk, flipping through my files like they were hers. "Mom said I should start learning the ropes," she said casually, like I wasn't even standing there. I snapped, "This is my office." She smirked, leaned back in my chair and said, "Not for long." My chest tightened, rage boiling in my veins, but before I could say more, my dad appeared in the doorway. For a split second, I thought he'd finally defend me, finally tell them to stop. But all he said was, "Emily, don't make a scene. Don't make a scene." As if I was the problem. As if my anger at being erased was more embarrassing than the betrayal itself. I stormed out, tears stinging my eyes, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. That night, I sat alone in the empty office long after everyone had left. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence, the faint smell of sawdust still lingering from the warehouse. I looked around at the walls lined with photos of my dad and me in better days, our first big contract, the ribbon cutting at the expansion, the night he handed me my office key and said, "This is your future." And I wondered how all of that had turned into this. How silence could erase decades of loyalty in a matter of months. I knew then that if I didn't fight back, I'd lose everything, my role, my legacy, my voice. But the real question haunted me. Fight back against who? My stepmom or my father? The breaking point came one Monday morning when I walked into the office and saw Lena sitting at the head of the table in the boardroom. Her papers neatly stacked, her lipstick-perfect smile plastered on like she owned the place. Around her sat half the management team, and they were listening, really listening, as she laid out new directions for the company. My stomach dropped as I realized she was presenting proposals I had been working on for weeks, except she'd twisted them, stripping out my name, my notes, my role. She looked up when I entered and said, "Emily, you're just in time. Why don't you sit and listen?" I froze, heat rising up my neck, then slowly walked to my seat, the scrape of the chair echoing in the room. I clenched my fists under the table as she continued talking about efficiency and modernizing leadership. Every word was a knife, cutting me out. Finally, I couldn't hold back. "Funny," I said, my voice shaking but sharp. "That's exactly what I proposed 2 weeks ago in my draft." The room went still. Lena's smile faltered for half a second, but then she tilted her head and said, "Oh, sweetheart, I must have misunderstood. You're still so new to managing these things." I slammed my notebook on the table. "New? I've been running operations since I was 19. Everyone in this room knows it." My eyes darted to my dad, praying for even a flicker of support, some reminder that I wasn't alone. He sat at the far end, his hand resting on the table, his eyes down, lips pressed tight. Nothing. My heart cracked, but my anger carried me forward. "You can erase my name from the documents, Lena, but you can't erase the truth. I'm the one who's built these systems, managed these contracts, kept this place running when no one else would. A murmur spread across the table. Some of the managers shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided my eyes. Lena's nails tapped the folder in front of her, that smirk tugging at her lips again. "Emily," she said sweetly, "no one is questioning your contributions. But we all know leadership requires more than hard work. It requires vision. And let's be honest, you're still learning." My chair screeched back as I stood. "Vision? You mean manipulation? Because that's all I see here. You walking in, pretending you care, when all you've ever done is scheme to take what isn't yours." Her smile snapped. For the first time, her voice hardened. "Watch your tone." The room went silent, the weight of her words pressing against me. I looked at my dad one more time, desperate for him to finally speak, to say, "Enough." But he just sat there, eyes fixed on a coffee stain on the table, like it was the most important thing in the world. And in that silence, I realized something terrifying. He wasn't neutral. His silence wasn't confusion. It was permission. The rage in me boiled over. I leaned across the table, my voice low but cutting through the silence. "You can try to cut me out, Lena. You can twist my words, lock my files, even put your daughter in my chair. But I know this business better than anyone in this room, and I'm not going anywhere." The managers stared, wide-eyed, some nodding almost imperceptibly, others clearly too scared to speak. Lena sat back, her eyes narrowing into slits, and whispered, "We'll see about that." I left the room shaking, my heart pounding in my ears, but there was something new burning in my chest, a fire that no silence could smother. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I was ready to fight. I knew after that boardroom showdown that I couldn't rely on anyone to save me, not even my dad. If I wanted to protect what was mine, I'd have to fight smart, not just loud. That night I sat in my office long after everyone had gone home, the hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing above me, the faint smell of old coffee in the air, and I started digging. Every file, every email, every contract Lena had touched in the past 6 months, I combed through them line by line. And that's when I saw it. Subtle shifts in language on documents, new signatures where mine should have been, clauses added that gave her more authority than she was ever supposed to have. She wasn't just trying to edge me out. She was laying the groundwork to erase me legally. My chest tightened, but instead of panicking, I started printing everything. I built a folder, then another, labeling each one with dates and details. By the time the sun started rising, my desk was covered in stacks of proof. Still, I knew paper alone wouldn't be enough. I needed people, witnesses who had seen what she was doing, who knew I wasn't imagining things. So the next day, I started quietly asking around. Not directly. No one wanted to be caught taking sides, but I knew how to listen. In the break room, one manager muttered about Lena pushing through vendor changes without his sign-off. In the warehouse, a foreman complained that Lena had cut overtime hours to pocket the savings for new initiatives. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. I wasn't the only one she was stepping on. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal, putting on a polite smile when Lena breezed through the hallways in her designer heels, her daughter trailing behind like a shadow. They thought I was beaten down, that I'd given up. But behind my office door, I was building a case brick by brick. One night, as I was locking up, I bumped into Mrs. Carter, the company's accountant who had been with us since before I was born. She lowered her voice and said, "Emily, I don't like what's happening. I've seen her changing numbers, moving money around. Be careful." My heart leapt. Finally, someone willing to speak. "Will you help me prove it?" I whispered. She hesitated, then nodded. That was the first real ally I had. Over the next week, Mrs. Carter slipped me copies of reports, spreadsheets showing discrepancies that Lena couldn't explain away. Together we built a trail that led straight back to her. But even with evidence piling up, I knew I needed the right moment to strike. If I came at her too early, she'd spin the narrative, paint me as the unstable stepdaughter lashing out. No, I had to wait for her to overplay her hand. And then she did. Lena scheduled a family meeting on a Saturday evening. I walked into the living room, and there she was, dressed in her expensive silk blouse, papers spread across the coffee table. My dad sat beside her, silent as always, his jaw tight but his voice absent. "Emily," she began, her tone sugary sweet, It's time we made things official. We've drawn up documents to restructure the company. You'll still have a role, of course, but in more of a supporting capacity. My blood ran cold. She was trying to strip me of everything right there in my own home. Her daughter lounged on the couch, smirking like she'd already won. I looked at my dad, begging him with my eyes to stop this madness. He just stared at the floor. My hands trembled as I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, thicker than hers, heavier, filled with every piece of evidence I'd collected. I slapped it on the table, the sound echoing through the room. "Funny," I said, my voice low but steady, "because these documents tell a very different story." Lena's smile cracked, her hand hovering over the papers. My dad finally looked up, his eyes wide. "What is this?" he asked. I locked eyes with him, my heart pounding. The truth. Every change she's made, every number she's twisted, every signature she forged. And I've got copies stored off-site in case anything happens to these. For the first time, Lena's mask slipped. She leaned forward, her voice sharp. "You don't know what you're talking about." But the tremor in her tone betrayed her. I looked her dead in the eye. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about. And soon, so will everyone else." The room went silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. For once, my dad wasn't just silent. He was speechless. And I realized I had finally shifted the power. The silence after I dropped that folder on the table was so thick I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Lena's daughter shifted uncomfortably, her smirk wiped clean as she stared at the papers like they might explode. My dad finally reached for the folder, his hands shaking as he flipped through the pages. Emails with her edits. Contracts signed without authorization. Spreadsheets showing money funneled into new initiatives that didn't exist. His face paled as he realized what he was holding. Lena tried to recover, her voice rising. "This is all a misunderstanding. Emily's twisting things to make me look bad. She's jealous, she always has been." I leaned forward, my voice steady as steel. "If it's a misunderstanding, then why do these numbers match the bank statements Mrs. Carter provided me? Why does your handwriting appear in the margins of every contract? Why did you erase my name from reports I submitted?" She froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. For once, she had no script, no fake smile to hide behind. My dad looked at her, his voice breaking. "Lena, is this true?" She snapped, slamming her palm against the table. "You never gave me any real authority. I had to take it. Do you think I was going to let your little girl run everything while I stood by? I deserve this as much as she does." That confession hung in the air, venom dripping from every word. My chest ached, but instead of breaking, I felt stronger. I looked at my dad, tears stinging my eyes. "You see, this is what I've been fighting alone. And you let it happen. Every time you said nothing, you chose her side. You didn't just stay silent, Dad. You betrayed me." His lips trembled, but he had no defense. For the first time, his silence looked like shame, not indifference. I stood tall, my voice rising with the fire I'd held back for too long. "This company is mine. Mom built it with you, I kept it alive with you, and I'll protect it with or without you. But I won't let her steal it. Not today. Not ever." With that, I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the recording Mrs. Carter and I had made of Lena admitting to altering numbers. I pressed play, and her own voice filled the room. "They'll never notice if we just move it here. It'll look legitimate." My dad's face collapsed. Lena's daughter gasped, covering her mouth. "And Lena?" She lunged forward, trying to grab the phone, but I stepped back, holding it high. "It's too late. This is backed up in 3 places. The board will hear it, the lawyers will see it, and by the time I'm done, you'll never set foot in this company again." My dad's voice cracked as he whispered, "Emily, I don't know what to say." I turned to him, my heart breaking, but my resolve stronger than ever. "Then don't say anything. Just watch as I fix the mess your silence allowed." I walked out of that room, shaking but unbroken, my folder clutched to my chest like armor. Over the next week, everything unraveled for Lena. The board reviewed the evidence, lawyers were called, and staff who had been too afraid to speak finally came forward with their own stories. One by one, the pieces of her empire crumbled. She was forced out, her daughter with her, their smug smiles replaced with bitterness and threats that no one took seriously. And my dad? He tried to apologize, fumbling through words about wanting peace, and not realizing how far it had gone. But the damage was done. His silence had carved a canyon between us that no apology could fill. I didn't cut him out, but I stopped waiting for him to stand beside me. I didn't need his approval anymore. The company thrived once Lena was gone, staff rallying behind me as if a weight had been lifted. I worked harder than ever, not just to prove myself, but to honor the promises my dad once made and broke. Late at night, when the office was quiet and the hum of the lights was my only companion, I'd glance at the old photo of Mom hanging on the wall and whisper, "I did it. I kept it ours." And deep down, I knew the greatest lesson wasn't about betrayal or greed. It was about silence. Because silence can be the sharpest knife, cutting deeper than words ever could. And I'll never forget the day my father's silence almost cost me everything, but instead taught me how to fight for myself.